what would you do if you didn't have to worry about your income? If I gave everybody here, say 10,000 rupees, and not just everybody here, but your parents, your friends, your neighborhood auntie, what would happen then? Would you go to your favorite bar and drink it all up? Would you stash it in a deposit? Or would you take the time off from work and do something you've really been wanting to? The reason I asked this question today is because we will discuss an idea that has been thrown around quite a bit, and maybe some of you have read about it in the newspapers recently. It's called Universal Basic Income. Now, what is this Universal Basic Income, or UBI? It is a monthly or regular transfer, so it could be weekly or fortnightly as well. It is a transfer of income into the bank accounts of every individual, so think all citizens, and it is without conditions. So it doesn't matter what income you earn. It could be 5,000, it could be 50,000. It doesn't matter if you don't send your children to school, if you do whatever. Everyone gets it. Now, where this idea isn't new, it's been discussed for a long time. It was first popped up in the 18th century. Thomas Paine, a political thinker, said that people who don't own land should be given money by the state, because to make up for the inheritance that they lost as a matter of birth. John Stuart Mill said that everybody should have enough money for subsistence, irrespective of whether they can work or not work. So the idea behind basic income is that poverty is not a natural calamity like an earthquake that just happens. It is a result of inequality and of unfair laws like property rights. So income actually is a public inheritance that everyone should be entitled to. And what basic income does is that it gives people like the working class a bargaining power to negotiate their terms. It recognizes things like unpaid labor that women do as caregivers in the household, which is hard work, but it's not recognized as economically productive and therefore is not remunerated. So, and I'm sure you recognize this as some of your mothers and grandmothers work at home, and it is hard labor, but it's not recognized. And the other thing that we found out over the years with small research studies and pilots is that basic income has far-reaching impact on the lives of people. And I know a lot of you would scoff at the idea of giving free money to poor people, particularly, and say they'll probably drink it up or spend it on excesses like cigarettes. But it doesn't really happen. So I'll speak from experience. I worked on the only basic income pilot in India, coincidentally in Madhya Pradesh, in Indore district, a few years ago in 2011-12. And we found that the results of basic income were fascinating. We saw that nutrition levels of families and particularly children went up because money was being spent on fruits, on vegetables, on milk products. People were concentrating better in class, little children, because their stomachs were full, so they could concentrate better and their educational outcomes were improved. We saw little things like people putting in their resources together and making community or shared assets like toilets. One of my favorite stories is from a teacher who was teaching in the school in one of the villages where we were making the transfer, and he said, these days the children's faces are washed, they look clean. So it was realized that people were buying a little bit of extra soap. The other thing we saw which gladdened my heart was the transfers happen in the month of June, the first ones, and July is where school opens for the first time in the new year, and the government gives uniforms, but it doesn't give shoes. So people use their transfers to buy shoes for their school-going children. So we found that a transfer of 200 rupees per person per month, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, was making big changes in the lives of the people. Now, why are we discussing this right now? Because suddenly it's gathered a lot of momentum. Switzerland just had a referendum on whether they should have basic income or not. Unfortunately, the supporters lost by quite a bit, 77% no, 23% yes. Finland is going to do an experiment. Canada already did one in the 1970s, but is going to do a bigger one in Ontario. And interestingly for you all, Y Combinator, an accelerator I'm sure you know very well, is also investing a lot of money to test the idea in a small part of California, where they've picked up 100 households. They're going to give them $2,000 a month for 2 years and see what's going to happen. Pierre Omidyar, another person you guys know, has spent $400,000 on a pilot in Kenya, which is going to be a long pilot of about 12 years. And in India as well, at home, in the economic survey which came out in the end of January, there was a whole chapter dedicated to basic income. And Arvind Subramaniam, the chief economic advisor, has this conversation in the chapter with Mahatma Gandhi and ascertains that the Mahatma would definitely want basic income in India. So, of course, the government of India is now hurriedly planning on how to do it. So, what is the reason for this chatter all of a sudden? It is paranoia. Suddenly, people are very afraid that automation is coming after all our jobs. Robots are going to do things that you and I do right now. And even Elon Musk is concerned, so it must be a problem. He believes in basic income too. So, I mean, in India, I've seen figures, we lose 550 jobs a day to automation. And that doesn't sound like such a bizarre idea, because you think about India and you see that there are still a lot of things that we do that are actually automated in different countries. And when you think about technologies like Amazon's drones dropping, your deliveries, or those fully automated stores that they've been planning, that's a lot of jobs. Those are our delivery boys, our cashiers, the people who man our stores. That's lakhs and lakhs of jobs. But then again, you want to think about, why is the Silicon Valley interested in something like this? What is their interest in what seems to be free money to people for social welfare? Now, the critique is that, and I tend to believe it, is that it's an excuse to make disruptive technologies. To say, guiltlessly, we can make those driverless cars and take your jobs because you have this basic income. The other thing that we've heard is that basic income should spark entrepreneurship. It should not just be a social security net. It should just be something, an interest-free loan, which is what Niti Aayog wants to make it. So it's not just that. And even in the government, the idea behind pushing basic income now is that all these big sort of hairy social policy programs, Narega, which is the employment guarantee scheme, or the PDS, which is the food support scheme, are corrupt, they're inefficient, they're leaking. Let's merge everything into one swift, transfer. And we have JAM, which is, of course, Jan Dhan, which is financial inclusion, Aadhaar, and mobile. So it's easy to, make welfare into this swift transfer and then forget about everything else. But the thing is, we should remember why social welfare exists. Narega, which I'm sure a lot of people know about, has changed the way minimum wage is structured in rural India. And the PDS, despite its leakages, which I'm sure are many, has actually prevented food riots in India in 2008 and the 2-year drought we just had. So the PDS is also an important instrument. And we shouldn't get on the bandwagon of these sexy new policies and say we'll try them too without thinking about these considerations. Now, when we were doing the pilot in Indore, there was a lot of planning, prepping, things we did, things we didn't do, things we wanted to do but couldn't do. There was, moments where things went completely awry. It started to rain, rivers swelled up. We had to carry bags of cash in makeshift boats to people's villages so that they could access their money. We tested everything many times. We did awareness workshops. We spoke to people and we researched very systematically what needed to be done and what people were doing with their money. And at the end of this 2-year experiment in just 4 villages, our recommendation finally was, yes, this can be tried for another trial. So the reason I'm discussing this right now is because just because an idea exists doesn't mean it needs to be immediately implemented. It needs to be tested. It needs to have questions answered around it. Just because Elon Musk is talking about it doesn't mean it's working in India. So Just like we test our vaccines, right? I'm sure you guys are aware of the trials. You start with a small sample, you expand it, you check for the impact it's having on people, you sort of think about how you can move it to different, each geography has a different impact. And that's how social policy also needs to be designed. Slowly, carefully, with careful checks at every step. Because this is India, one size does not fit all. Things go awry without us realizing, and whatever infrastructure you've created doesn't necessarily respond to things. And that's what I've learned from my experience, and also from a big idea that was implemented, which is demonetization. So we all know that when you come up with what seems like a really good idea, but you don't think it through, things tend to go awry. And the other thing about basic income is that it is so popular between the left and the right as well, along the political spectrum. So the left, and I guess me as well, think of it as an additional social policy, social welfare scheme that needs to go hand in hand with some very core programs. And the right thinks of it as a quick and dirty way to extend welfare to people without, having the government to employ large machinery. So given that this is an idea that everyone loves, you need to be suspicious about it. So you need to test it repeatedly. And the other questions that basic income needs to answer is stuff like, what is the impact on inflation? How does India as a labor surplus country respond to it with work? How do we think about people assigning meaning to their lives if work is taken care of? So nothing has been decided, and I'll have you know that while there's been so much chatter about it, there's very little evidence. Like I said, this thing exists in the economic survey, and there's been one pilot in 4 villages of India, which I was a part of, so I know that it's the only one. And suddenly we're talking about it like it's happening. I almost expected Mr. Jaitley to announce it in the budget, as did many other people. So the thing is, the reason I'm talking about is that ideas exist, and they're all very, very good. And the ones that are impacting the lives of 1 billion people in India need to be tested. So to the idea that it is a snowflake, it needs to be nurtured. Otherwise, it's just going to be a snowball and it's going to smack you in the face. So, yeah, thank you.